It's never easy for any athlete to make it to the Olympics, but this year it was especially hard for marathon runners to make the cut. According to new rules, the maximum number of runners that could qualify for the Paris Olympic Games from any country was 3. But to unlock those spots, athletes had to run faster than 2 hours, 8 minutes, and 10 seconds. I'll do the math for you. That's an average of about 4.9 minutes per mile, 426.2 miles. Crazy fast. Only 2 runners in the United States met that time threshold in qualifying marathons, and both of them graduated from BYU, Connor Mantz and Clayton Young. But here's the confusing part. Even though Mantz and Young unlocked the spots, that didn't mean they were automatically going to the Olympics. They still had to compete in the Olympic trials. The top 2 runners in that race would be the ones to go to Paris.
There was obviously a lot at stake. There was only 2 spots available to make the Olympic team, and there was over 200 guys racing that day. I think we were both nervous about one another going on that start line.
Welcome to the Y Magazine podcast, bringing you ideas, stories, and voices from Brigham Young University. I'm Whitney Archibald, and today we get to talk to Connor Mantz and Clayton Young about their road to the Olympics, their friendship, and their faith. This episode is based on an article in the summer 2024 issue of Y Magazine about BYU's distance runners called Fast Feats by Jeffrey Call, which talks about several of the great athletes and coaches, women and men, who have come through BYU's formidable distance running program, including another runner who will be joining Mantz and Young on the Olympic marathon race, Rory Linkletter, representing Canada. 4 more BYU runners will be representing the U.S. in other events. BYU alum Courtney Wayment will be competing in women's steeplechase, and Kenneth Rooks and James Corrigan, who are current BYU students, are competing in men's steeplechase. Another runner, alum Whitney Morgan, will be running the 5,000-meter race. Alum Stephanie Rovetti is on the U.S. women's rugby team, and Jimmer Fredette on the 3-on-3 U.S. men's basketball team brings the total number of BYU alumni and students at the 2024 Paris Olympic Games to 9. But before we start talking about the Paris Games themselves, let's go back to Mantz and Young at that Olympic trial, held February of 2024 in Orlando, Florida. The friends had been training together for the race, though it's a tricky balance because they were also competing against each other. But it became clear early on that the competition between them wasn't going to get in the way of supporting each other. At the first water bottle station, Connor Mantz fumbled his bottle. Here's Clayton Young.
Our first bottle was about 2-3 miles in, and you got to recognize that bottles for professional runners, especially those first bottles, are so critical to performance later in the race. Your body really only has enough calories and fuel to last about 20 miles. And so you pretty much have to intake those calories during the race. And that first bottle is probably the most critical bottle. So Connor went to go grab his bottle. It flipped off his finger and it went into the crowds, and he immediately turned to me and looked at me and he said, "Hey, can I have whatever you have left in your bottle?" And I said, "Yeah, absolutely." So it was kind of this cool moment where I got to share with him early on. And I think it kind of just reminded him and I that, we're out there to work together, come what may. Ultimately, when we got about 8 miles to go of the 26-mile race, there's this cool moment where Connor turned to me and he stuck out his hand, and I kind of looked at his hand and I was a little bit like, "What do you want? What do you need?" And I realized he wanted a high five. And it's probably the sloppiest high five you'll ever watch on NBC. But it was this cool moment, and I recognized that, Connor was still Team Clayton, that he was still on my side, that he wanted me to make this team as much as he wanted to make that team. And the rest of that race, from him and I breaking away with 4 miles to go to finishing 1-2 over the finishing stretch, it all started, in practice, on the start line, but on that high five with 8 miles to go, it was pretty special.
It was this surreal experience of just when is this actually happening? And I was so prepared for what happens if I don't make the team? What happens if Clayton doesn't make the team and I do? What happens if Clayton makes the team and I don't? And I didn't really ever plan for what happens if both of us make the team. And so it was pretty cool running down that home stretch and being like, is it just really us two? This is pretty special.
And with that, it was official. They're going to Paris. The big race will be on August 10th. And ultimately, the International Olympic Committee opened up 5 more marathon spots, which means the third place runner from those trials, Leonard Carrier, will also be joining Mantz and Young at the Games. Before I talked to Mantz and Young, I watched lots of footage of their races and training sessions. But it's one thing to watch them on screen and another thing to actually see them in action. A couple of weeks after we spoke, I participated in a 10K race called the Boulder Boulder, a Memorial Day tradition for my family. Still recovering from my rock climbing accident, my goal was to finish, not break any records. I did finish and joined the other amateur finishers in the stadium at the University of Colorado Boulder to watch the professional race. Suddenly, there was Connor Mantz running into the stadium ahead of the pack, and he was flying. Clayton Young was a few paces behind him, and Jared Ward, another BYU alum and former Olympian, was just a few runners behind him. It was so fun to watch them run in person and cheer them on. Connor Mantz took first place, Clayton Young 7th, Jared Ward 14th, and I came in at 43,045th place. Instead of introducing you to Connor Mantz and Clayton Young myself, I thought it would be more interesting for them to introduce each other. I asked them to describe each other both as athletes and as friends. Here's Connor Mantz.
As a teammate, he's very particular. Like he looks at every little detail, which is good because as a teammate, it's like, oh, okay, like I'm learning more about the sauna from him. I mean, he just does all this little research, or he'll be like, okay, like I think for training we should switch it this way because of XYZ, or very just like particular about every little thing. And sometimes that's good, sometimes it's bad. That's you get that as a teammate. But I think like his attitude toward running has a lot of things that are very helpful for me, and it's easier to rely on him. And so that's pretty cool. As a friend, Clayton's just a good guy. We've known each other since 2017 when he was the team captain at BYU, and just fun to have him around. And I see him probably more than anyone else other than my wife, just because of our training and how, if we were working jobs together, we'd be coworkers. Like we'd see each other just like every day.
And here's Clayton Young.
Connor as an athlete is scary. He's scary in the sense that, wow, he is extremely competitive. He's such a hard worker. He knows how to hurt more than anybody else. He's a grinder. He is tough. He is tough as nails. And he has no chill. Like he's just pedal to the metal all of the time. And it's very admirable. He has such a passion for this sport as well, more than anybody that I know. Like if all of the professional side of running was taken away, he would still be the one running, 10 miles every day. He just loves running wholeheartedly. As a person, Connor is very meek. He's very humble. He's introverted. He has a lot of mentors in this space that have helped him and guided him, and he loves to learn from them. Connor is a disciple of Jesus Christ. It's not uncommon for me to show up to a run or an event and to see him climbing out of the car in church clothes from some activity that he's had to serve at or temple attendance that he's been to. That's been pretty cool. When I was going through the highs and lows of my professional career, whether that was knee surgery or a bad race or a bad workout, he's very good at reaching out and being a friend when others are going through the thick of it. And I think that comes because of, he's been through the thick of it.
That pure love for the sport came through when I asked each of them what they were most excited about for the Olympics.
Most excited about the race. I think that's that's the reason I'm going to Paris, is to run. But I'm excited to see what the experience of being an Olympian is like. I'm excited to go and see the streets of Paris with my wife. I'm going to be in the Olympic Village, so I won't get to see her too much, but I'm really excited to be there with her. And my family's coming, her family's coming, so it's going to be really a fun experience to be all together.
Every kid kind of has that dream in their mind. It's, something that I've thought about for a long time. I think as an athlete and as a runner, I've always thought about the next stage, and now as a professional athlete, the goal for the last 4 or 5 years has been to make an Olympic team. But it's been baby steps along the way. And I've just had some very key moments in my life where I've been inspired, whether that was watching, Apollo Ono take silver in the 2002 Winter Olympics when I was in second grade, or watching, Jared Ward, a mentor in front of mine, make the 2016 Rio Games in the marathon, or even hearing the stories about Coach Ed Eyestone make both of his Olympic teams. It's been a constant reminder and a constant, vision of what I could do. But it didn't really become a reality until, 6 to 8 months ago. So I feel really blessed to be in this position for sure.
What are you most excited about?
To compete. Like for me, like it's kind of funny as we've been planning these details. There's been so many group texts and group chats that my wife has like been leaving me out of so I can focus on the race, because everyone else is like, oh, like, should we go see the Eiffel Tower and the Champs-Élysées and the Sacré Coeur and like all these, like it's a vacation for a lot of people, and I'm excited to kind of share this journey with them. But for me, it's going to be monk mode until race day. And so I can't wait to be on the start line and to compete. That's why I'm there. And I am excited though to like, opening ceremonies are going to be a blast, I'm sure. That's when it's going to be a reality that I am an Olympian, right? But by and large, I'm excited to race.
Friendly competition has been a big motivator for Clayton Young since the beginning of his running career.
When I was in 5th grade, my school started a program called the Mileage Club. And every Friday during lunch recesses, the kids could go out to the playground and run a lap around the soccer field. And every lap that they ran, they would be handed a ticket. And you could run as many laps as you wanted. And so you'd collect these tickets. And after recess was over, you could go and you would turn those tickets in to the teacher. And she would tally them up. And it was both an individual competition and a classroom competition. And it just so happened that one of my best friends, his name was Alex Montes de Oca, and he was in the other class. And so him and I became really competitive. And so him and I just went back and forth trying to see who could run the most miles. We ended up running over 100 miles that year during Friday lunch recesses. And that's when I really realized that, running was something that I was good at.
Connor Mantz got into running as a fun way to hang out with his family.
When I was 9, my dad and my older brother ran a half marathon, and I wanted to be like my dad and be like my older brother. And so I wanted to run a half marathon. And so when I was 12, my dad signed me up for a half marathon and was like, all right, the only thing you have to do is train for it. And I was like, okay. And it was just a half marathon. There's a big difference, I think, between what the body goes through running a half marathon and a full marathon. And so, like, my dad just had me run, a few times a week just to build up to make sure I could finish a half marathon. And after that, I was like, okay, I want to keep doing this. I want to do another one. I want to see how fast I can do it. And then I got to high school and everyone's like, you should do track. You should run cross country. And so that's kind of the way I got into running.
Both Mantz and Young went on to impressive high school careers in cross country and track and field. At American Fork High School, Young competed at a national level and was recruited by many colleges, including BYU.
I went on a couple of recruiting visits, but ultimately decided to go to BYU for kind of 3 reasons. Like when I think about my selection, it was number one, I wanted a school that had my major. Like I wanted to study mechanical engineering. I knew that running was important, but there's no guarantee. And so BYU checked that box. The second thing is like I'd come from a very good team environment at American Fork. And at BYU, I knew that there was a good team environment from like a competitive standpoint. A lot of schools will recruit you to be a big fish in a little pond. But I loved the idea of being a little fish in a big pond and being the best fish that I could be. And then the third reason was obviously because of what the university represents. Like BYU has a lot of my, same values and standards, and a lot of my good friends growing up were also going there. And that's where I could see my future.
So what were some of your highlights at BYU?
Yeah, it's easy to focus on the biggest highlight of my career, which was winning the NCAA 10K. That is the highlight of my NCAA career, especially when you look at the ups and downs of my entire career, to kind of capitalize pretty much on the last 10,000 meter race as a collegiate athlete. And that's essentially what paved the road for me to become a professional athlete, right? Like my future does not exist without that race, more or less. And so that was definitely a highlight. And what was really special about that race too is, we had qualified 12 of 48 guys to the regional level. Of those 12 guys from BYU, 6 of those guys took the spots to make it to nationals. So we had a quarter of the field at nationals.
Wow.
And then of those 6 guys at nationals, we went 1, 3, and 4. First place, third place, fourth place. And that is like unreal. And
That's
so,
awesome.
yes, it was like an individual highlight for me, right? Like I won the NCAA 10K, but it was so special to turn around and see, Connor McMillan, one of my big friends and teammates throughout the last 4 years, take third place, and then Connor Mantz take fourth place as an underclassman. Yes, it was a big individual moment, but it was like a brotherhood.
Connor Mantz was also heavily recruited for his college running career, but BYU coach Ed Eyestone won him over.
I looked at colleges all around the country. I took 4 visits, and I was leaning toward Princeton. But then Coach Eyestone took a home visit, visited my parents' house. I realized, this is a coach who's been where I want to be. This is a coach who's coached people to be where I want to be. So it's not just he was a great athlete, but he's also been a great coach. And so I decided I wanted to go and represent BYU and run for BYU. It helped that Eyestone understood what it's like when you serve a mission and what it's like coming back from serving a mission.
Yeah.
I think that's something that's really difficult that not every coach understands, but that I thought would be good for me.
That's amazing. So how has your relationship with Coach Eyestone progressed since that first home visit?
I've learned what his coaching style is like, what he is like as a person. I've just gained a ton of respect for him. He's just a good man, and that's a big thing that you want in a coach. But he's been a very big mentor. He's helped me out when I was making the jump between running in college and running as a professional. He really guided me with that. And I think that's something that, a lot of coaches have good experience with, but I think Eyestone, he's so well respected. He's so well liked in the professional world. I can't say enough good things about Coach Eyestone. And I mean, he just puts a lot of work into us. And so it's, our success as his athletes is his success as well.
I asked Clayton Young the same question about Coach Eyestone.
Coach Eyestone, I like to call him a Renaissance man. Yes, he's a phenomenal coach. Yes, he was a phenomenal athlete, but he's also, a father of 6 girls, and he loves to act in his local play for A Christmas Story every year. And, he loves good music and he has a great style for being a 50-year-old, 60-year-old man. And he's just a Renaissance man. He's got so many layers to him. And, you can't leave his office without a smile on your face. He's such a builder. But yeah, my relationship has changed over the years. I think what makes him a phenomenal coach is just the independence and the leadership that he instills in his athletes. He's somebody that has been a man of God and a family man, and he's shared that with us. And, he's the last person that will talk about his accolades, but when you ask him the right questions and get him in the right room and really pull it out of him, he has some of the best life lessons that you will ever hear. And that's been pretty special to get to know him on a personal level more than just a coach-athlete relationship.
This element of faith is something that permeates the lives and careers of Mantz and Young as well.
I think my faith has really helped me to understand, that running isn't everything. It's so easy when you're an athlete to get so focused in and dialed in on your sport, but it's just a sport. You gotta take a step back. And I think the big thing that helps me do that is my faith. I think also while I've had amazing mentors as athletes, I think mentors in the church has been, even better. I've had some wonderful bishops. For example, right before the Olympic trials, I had stress reaction in my femur, and I was probably 10 weeks out. And so I kind of freaked out because it was oh, did I really just go from I'm the favorite to win the Olympic trials to I'm not even going to be running at the Olympic trials. And I was working with doctors and everyone, but my wife and I were serving in a young single adult state. I ran into one of the bishops and he was asking me how I was doing. And I was like, well, not great. The Olympics has kind of been my dream. I missed it by, 2 spots in 2021. I'm really hoping to be in that top 2, top 3 for the Olympic trials in the marathon. And I think it's doable, but now I have a stress reaction in my femur. And so I talked to this bishop and he's like, hey, if you need a blessing, let me know. And I'm like, yeah, absolutely. And it definitely calmed my feelings. Not completely, but it was definitely I'm going to be okay. It's going to be fine. Whether that's I make the team or I don't make the team, it's all going to be fine. And so that was a really cool experience. I was healed within, I don't know, a few weeks I was running.
Wow.
And usually when I've had this injury, it's been eight weeks is kind of the time frame until I start running. But this time it was about 2 weeks. And so that was pretty comforting.
I feel like there's no better comparison to the gospel of Jesus Christ than running. One of the things that I've really pondered on is this idea of the mundanity of excellence. Life is mundane, and it's a bunch of repetitive, boring tasks. But as you focus on the mundane parts, whether that be running miles or reading your scriptures or saying your prayers or going to church, that's when the excellent outcome will come. It's the mundanity of excellence. It's this idea that we often talk about, the process instead of the outcome. And, as we recognize that all we need to do is focus on these mundane tasks, that's when they really truly become a joy, and that journey becomes a joy as well. So that's when I think of running and just how hard it is, how mundane it is. What really makes it all worth it is I don't even want to say that. I was going to say what makes it all worth it is the celebration of the fitness at the end of the race. But if you're looking for just that, it's not going to be worth it, right? Like you have to find, as cliche as it sounds, joy in the journey or in the mundane things that make that excellent outcome so great. Or you're going to get to the finish line and think, well, that wasn't worth it. It's going to lose its power, its savor at the end. So yeah, for me, that's how running relates to the gospel for sure.
Yeah, marathon running especially highlights that idea of the mundane.
Yeah. Something that Coach Eystone often says to us that listeners maybe have heard before is this idea of that consistent competence equals eventual excellence. And I love the word competence because it doesn't mean you're hitting home runs every day. It's just that you're being competent. You're just hitting base hits every day. And as you are consistently competent, you will eventually be excellent.
Clearly, Clayton Young is a philosopher as well as a runner. He also shared how he overcame the challenge of comparison as he was preparing for the Olympic trials.
A couple weeks leading into the Olympic trials, there was this special moment where I felt like I was just really kind of in the depths of comparison. Like this is when all of the media is picking up. And so you're seeing people post more on social media. You're seeing all of the standard media talk about different athletes and different favorites and, who's going to take those 2 spots. And it became very daunting. Like I just started comparing myself to all these other athletes and especially comparing myself to my teammate and friend, Connor Mantz, right? He was the favorite going into this race. And rightly so. I had trained with him every day in practice and he was absolutely destroying me some days in practice. And I was trying to hang on for dear life. But as we approached those last couple of weeks, I kind of had a special moment where I had received an email from a missionary friend of mine. And at the very end of his email, he talks about reading this talk on comparison from a BYU speech devotional. And so I went and I pulled up that talk, and it was just exactly what I needed in that moment going into the Olympic trials. He quotes this phrase that, your race is not with him, your race is with yourself. Him being, Connor Mantz, him being that guy on the starting line or that guy that was the defending champion last time. And ultimately, it was this moment where I finally got to recognize that, true growth and true comparisons comes from comparing, Clayton Young today with the Clayton Young of yesterday, with the Clayton Young of last week to the Clayton Young of a year ago. And as I kind of embraced that mentality going to the Olympic trials, this idea of comparison kind of slipped away. And I was able to really embrace this healthy competitiveness and teamwork with Connor. Running is a very individual sport. It is, it's you versus the clock or you versus others. But true growth lies in developing relationships and learning from the strengths and weaknesses of others. And boy, is it a lot more fun. There's a brotherhood that comes with running. That friendship is pure and priceless.
It's not just a team with me and Clayton. working together, but it's, it takes a whole village to help an athlete make the Olympic team. So I think, I just am grateful I had so many people to help me, not just Clayton, but like my wife, my parents, my coach, my teammates in college, my teammates that were, trained with me as I was pro. And so it's a pretty impactful thing when you have so much support. I'll just be running that race very grateful with everybody on my mind.
Thank you for listening to the Y Magazine podcast. We put a link in our show notes to that devotional that Clayton Young was talking about, Wrestling with Comparisons by Associate Professor of Church History and Doctrine, J.B. Hawes. And Clayton Young's thoughts on mundanity reminded me of our last episode with artist Paige Crosland Anderson, who also talked about the beauty in the mundane.
Every single piece has some tie-in to just dailiness, kind of quotidian routine. And so a consistent personal work that I have had is to find the beauty and the majesty in the dailiness.
We'll put a link to that episode in our show notes as well. And finally, if this episode inspired you to maybe go out on a run, you may also enjoy the episode Lifelong Wellness with advice from several professors who teach wellness classes at BYU. This episode was produced by me, Whitney Archibald, with executive producer Brooklyn Romer. Original music, mixing, and mastering by Jarrett Davis.